Hi there. I am Lauren Kramer of More Miles Run Coaching, and I am here with Michelle Zahn of More Miles Run Coaching.
Hi.
All right, so today we are having a nutrition chat, and we are talking about fueling your training. So in our last YouTube video, we talked about when you are moving from your base training phase into your primary training phase. These are the weeks that you are spending doing the most specific work toward your goal race. This is your primary phase of training. It's where you're doing the most hardy work. So we talked about how you need to be fueling that both on and off the run. But today we're going to dig in a little bit deeper to how you should be fueling on the run. So in this phase, you're going to have more volume of work. You're also going to have a larger volume at intensity. So you're doing more speed work, you're doing more hills, you're doing probably a good bit of tempo work, especially if you're training for an endurance event. And then your long runs are genuinely going to be long. You are building time on your feet, you are building mileage, and we are at a point that we need to be fueling for health, for performance, and also for practice for race day. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. So Michelle, last time when we touched on fueling your long run, fueling your midweek workout, what does that mean? How should we be fueling those workouts on the run?
Yes, your hard workouts and your long runs are both perfect opportunities to start practicing for race day. And I suggest you start doing that now so that by the time you get to race day, you're fully trained and aware of what products work for you and which ones don't. But that looks like typically in a perfect scenario, it's 200 to 300 calories per hour during your workout. So that doesn't include anything before or after. It's during your run, 200 to 300 calories per hour, consisting mainly, if not all, from carbohydrates. So especially during those tempo runs, you're in a zone where you're burning way more carbohydrates than fat. So you need to keep replenishing those stores. We have very limited stores of carbohydrates and glycogen in our system. So it's important to constantly be replenishing that. And that works out to 50 to about 75 grams of carbs per hour. So, you have to kind of look at the gels you're using and start doing math to calculate out how much of that you need in a given session before you head out the door.
Okay, so 200 to 300 calories per hour. I think to a lot of people that might sound like a lot. So let's say either we're not fueling our runs at all, or maybe we're not fueling anywhere near that 200 calorie is really the minimum. And I think I should emphasize a larger person and or a higher intensity and or a longer duration of events, you're going to really want to be working toward the higher end of this range. So we say 200 is the minimum. For a lot of people, again, that's a lot. So if we are not at that 200 calories per hour minimum, how do we start? Do we just jump in and start putting that much fuel in our system, or is there a better way to go about that?
Yeah, so I definitely recommend people gut train, just like you train your body slowly to adapt to higher speeds and longer runs. We need to do the same thing with our carbohydrate intake. If you haven't been fueling properly and you jump into taking one gel every 20 minutes or 30 minutes, you're going to have a lot of GI upset, more than likely, maybe muscle cramps. So you don't want to jump in with both feet and start ingesting a ton of carbohydrates where you haven't before. I recommend with my nutrition athletes that I work with that they start at one gel every 45 minutes during their runs, just to get that habit formed of taking the gels on the run and also train your gut to handle that much on the run. And then we slowly back up the time until they hit that 200 to 300 calorie mark per hour and find where in that guideline they fit. Because some people can handle the 300 and some people never will. We've got to find that perfect sweet spot for you to continue to fuel your runs without having a lot of just distress on the run as well.
Okay, so that brings up a whole nother question, and this is maybe kind of the heart of our conversation here is, okay, when we're talking about 200 to 300 calories an hour, like you said, if you're not experienced in taking in that much fuel and you try to throw it all in there at once, it can cause GI upset, which is pretty common. But when we're looking at 200 to 300 calories an hour, there are a lot of different ways to do that. And even when we talk about having a gel every 30 minutes, a gel every 45 minutes, gels vary widely from product to product. So I know you have a couple things. I brought a couple things. I have 4 different gels here. These are 4 of my personal favorite. Every single one of these is different in calorie and carbohydrate content, in electrolyte content, pretty widely. I mean, I've got all the ways from 100 calories and 20 grams of carbs up to double that, 180 calories and 42, I think, 45 grams of carbs in one serving. These are all the same size practically. So let's talk a little bit about about how gels are different from one another, what we want to be looking for in a gel, and what kinds of different products might work for different people.
Yeah, so there's a lot of differences in gels. I have 3 other ones here. I love the Martin gel that you had there, but I also have this new one that's kind of hitting out, the UCAN Edge, which has gotten a lot of publicity lately, Untapped, and then Huma gels. So those are my additional, in addition to Martin, I use these. But each of them has a different combination of carbohydrates. And this is where things are really kind of important, and you want to make sure your intake includes all of them. We have glucose, sucrose, maltodextrin, and fructose are the most common ones you'll see in there. Glucose and sucrose are the fastest absorbing. So they're going to be what your body will uptake right away. And then maltodextrin is more of a slow release carbohydrate. So that's going to give you more sustained energy. But each of these uses a different protein transporter for your body to absorb. So this is why it's important. If you take all of one type of carbohydrate, you're going to use all of your transporters for that type, and the rest is kind of going to waste. It's going to take longer to absorb, and you're not maximizing what your body can take in. So you want to use all the different pathways that your body has available to absorb as much carbohydrate as you can. So I recommend looking for products that have at least glucose, sucrose, and maltodextrin. Fructose is also a quick absorbing carbohydrate, but it's just a natural version, a more natural version. You'll see that in like Untapped or Stingers. I think even Huma Gel has it because they're more natural products versus manufactured. So that's definitely something you want to make sure you have in your gels. Is get a good combination of carbohydrates throughout your run, and you can mix. I mean, if you like your Untapped, just mix it with another type of gel later on in the hour.
So I think if I could put that into a visual, if you can visualize in your gut, you have 4 different pathways that sugars can be absorbed. Different types of sugars can be absorbed. So if you have one type of sugar in your gel or your chew or your whole food, whatever your nutrition product is, you are only absorbing via that one pathway. Whereas if you have multiple different types of sugars in your product, you're absorbing via 2, 3, 4 different pathways. So you're getting a lot more absorption. It's delivering faster to your system. And it's less likely to cause the GI distress that a lot of people experience because you're getting so much more absorption faster across 4 different channels as opposed to just the one. Yeah, okay. So that's maybe an interesting discussion, and I think it's a debate that's out there quite often, is the debate between sports nutrition versus whole food. What is your opinion on that? Is one better than the other? Can we use both? Should we use one or the other? What's your opinion on sports nutrition versus whole food?
So my opinion is 5 hours is kind of like my magic number. Anything under 5 hours, you can, for the most part, get away with just sports nutrition. Your carbohydrates should be able to carry you through. There are exceptions. Some people feel like they need something solid, and that's where chews come in, or gummy bears, which are still mostly carbs, but they're like going to give you more of a sense of like you ate something. 5 hours plus, you're getting into an area where your body not only needs to fuel your run, but it needs to fuel its day-to-day activities. And also, if you're at a 5 hour or more race, you're going to be burning more fat than carbs anyway. So you need to replenish your carbs. I wouldn't ignore them, but you also need to be eating more actual food because you're not at the same intensity as a marathon or under. That 5 hours is kind of like, if your marathon takes more than 5 hours, you might want to pack something at least small to eat, like a meal on the go bar or a split. I love the peanut butter and jelly splits because they have protein, fat, and carbs, and they're easy to eat on the run. In ultra marathons, you definitely need to be eating much more than a sports gel during your run.
So intensity really matters there, I think, is the takeaway, that if you are working at a high intensity, you are pushing for a fast effort, whatever that is to you. If your body is working at a higher intensity, you want these engineered products that are designed to absorb quickly and be the most gentle on your stomach, the most efficient for your system. But as you're getting into a lower intensity and longer duration, that you can start to have a little bit more flexibility there, because your body is using multiple, or you're always using multiple. Your body is using a more even split of energy systems. And even, as simple as you can't chew a sandwich when you're trying to run a Boston qualifying marathon time. It's just not going to happen. Whereas when you're power hiking a hill, you probably can, and you can get a little bit more fuel and a little bit more variety on your palate. Yeah, so the higher the intensity, the more beneficial an engineered sports product will be for you. The lower the intensity and longer duration, the more you can productively branch into the whole food options as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is something I see pretty commonly, especially in long runs. As our long runs really start to build here, we're in double-digit miles, we're in double-digit hours of long run training. It's pretty common that folks will kind of go into their pantry, grab a handful of things and put it in their pocket, and go run, and maybe not be aware of what they have in terms of calories, carbohydrates, and haven't sat down to do the math in what they need for the run that they're going out for. And I think this is really important. I think it is really helpful to take 5 minutes before you go for your long run to sit down and do the math on what you need. So what does that mean? If we are preparing, let's say, for a 2-hour long run, regardless of how many miles that is for you, how can we do the math for a 2-hour long run to make sure that we have the fuel that we need for that workout?
Yeah, so you want to count, how long it's going to take. So 2 hours, you figure maybe one gel every 30 minutes. So not necessarily at the end of your run. You don't need to worry about that last 30 minutes, but you're going to need at least 3 gels on the run plus 1 before your run. So that 15 to 30 minute gel. So 1 2-hour run would take 4 gels on average. Now that's kind of on an average number of what a gel contains. You need to look at your carbohydrate content. So like Untapped has 25 grams of sugar. So out of 50 grams per hour, this is pretty high. You might only need 2 of these in an hour. So that's perfect. Every 30 minutes, you can pop an Untapped, where Huma has 16. Oh, no, it has 25 as well. Sorry, comes sugars. The exception here is like UCAN. That's a whole different fueling strategy. We can get into a different video. That's a little bit different. It's a slow release carb. But if you're, let's say, for instance, you only have 20 grams in your gel, you're going to have to take those more frequently and spread them out. You might need 5 or 6, depending on your run length. So take the 50 grams of carbohydrate per hour minimum, if that's where you are, and that's where I try to start most people. Divide that by the total carbohydrates on the back of your gel, and then that tells you how many gels per hour you need to take. So if you need to take 3 gels in an hour, every 20 minutes, set an alert on your watch to pop a gel. If it works out to 25 minutes, that's where you need to start setting alerts on your watch, on your phone, to remind you to eat at those intervals, to keep your you want to keep that fuel source set steady. You don't want to have ups and downs where you take in 50 grams at one point and then crash. That keeps everything steadily in your bloodstream throughout your run. So again, you don't need to count that last part of the 2 hours, because then you're home and you can have an actual meal. You don't need to take a gel at the last part of your run. But up until that last interval, whether that's 20 or 30 minutes of your run, you want to count how many gels you'll need.
I think that's a really good point. So when we say 200 to 300 calories per hour, that doesn't mean 200 or 300 calories on the hour. That means
right.
the hour. So in a 2-hour long run, if you're taking 100-calorie gel, that means that you are fueling at the start at 0. Then you're also doing at 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. Like you said, it's a 2-hour long run, you don't need to fuel at 2 hours because you're finished. That's when you're done running. That's when we work on protein intake and replenishing carbohydrates, which we've covered in the last video. But okay, so breaking it down, looking at the nutrition facts on the product that you're taking, looking at the serving size on the product you're taking, especially when it comes to chews or gummy bears, whole food products. It's common that I'll see people say they pop 1 or 2 chews an hour. The serving size for those is the whole package for most of that stuff for chews, and obviously if you're using a whole food, you're going to need to look at and measure out what the serving size is. So if you're taking 1 or 2 chews per hour, 1 or 2 chews per 30 minutes, you're probably under fueling. So look at not only the nutrition facts, but also look at the serving size and make sure that you are taking the full serving size every 30 minutes or every to get those 200 to 300 calories per hour. So do the math. Like I said, it's worth taking 5 minutes to check your labels, count out how many you're going to need for that 0 start through the finish of your run. I think another thing we can touch on really quick then is liquid calories and how that plays into reaching your 200 to 300 calorie minimum, and also hydration, how hydration plays into your fueling. So what is your opinion on using liquid calories, whether it's a high calorie product or a low calorie product, as part of your fueling strategy?
Yeah, so personally, I keep my electrolytes and my carbohydrates separate. And that's because I know what my electrolyte needs are, and my carbohydrate needs don't match that at all. So I haven't found a product that satisfies both, and I don't know anyone that will find a liquid product that satisfies both. And likewise, if you take a gel, even the ones with electrolytes don't have near enough electrolytes that you're going to need to keep your body hydrated properly. So I personally keep them separate. I use I usually use an element pack in my hydration bladder because I know my salt needs. And then I use Martin gels, which don't have electrolytes. So it's perfect. I know exactly how much electrolytes I'm getting. I know how much carbohydrate I'm getting. And I'm not saying these are products that everyone should use. It's just what I personally have chosen because I can very much control both the amount of electrolytes I take in as well as the amount of carbohydrate I take in. And I also like the untapped because it's same. There's very few electrolytes in that. So I recommend that my athletes do the same. Learn what your needs are on both ends, and then dial in your hydration separately from your carbohydrate intake. And there are some products, I'm not saying you should dump your scratch down the drain or your tailwind. Go ahead and keep using it, but I would practice keeping that fuel in addition to that. Make sure that you need to, what you need to add into that as well. So if you're taking in 20 grams of carbohydrates of tailwind per hour, make up for that with your gels. But my other problem with liquid hydration is if you have a bladder, you don't know how much you're drinking. You don't know what your actual carbohydrate intake is because you don't know how many ounces you've consumed or if you diluted it too much or too little. So I really try to steer clear of liquid carbohydrates on the run and keep them all in packets where I know exactly what I'm taking and when.
That's a really great perspective. And also that your hydration needs can change day to day. So, if you're, like you said, if you're carrying a pack, you really don't know how much you're drinking because you can't see it. But you're also, on a hot day, you could put that pack away or want to put that pack away in an hour, but you can't take in that many carbohydrates. Your gut can't handle that many carbohydrates. So hydration in your bottle, fuel in your pocket is the general rule of thumb that we really recommend, so that your hydration needs can be dialed into the weather, and your sweat demands, and your nutrition needs are dialed into your workload, and meeting your energy demand. I think my personal favorite, I do really like Scratch, is my favorite, but it's a low calorie. So there's a huge difference between like a low calorie like Scratch hydration product and a hydration fuel source. I'm getting stuck on my words there. Something like Tailwind or Scratch Super High Carb that has a lot of calories in it. There's a huge difference. So a low calorie hydration product, Scratch Hydration, for example, has like 80 calories per bottle. That's really kind of just topping you off on that 200 to 300 calorie range. And if you're putting away a bottle an hour, and you're fueling at 200 calories an hour, you're still within kind of a healthy range. Whereas if you're using a high calorie nutrition product, you can really clog up your gut before you're actually hydrated.
Yeah, there's one other thing, I guess. I'm sorry, didn't mean to
No, go
interrupt
ahead.
you. So one other thing to consider also is if you're planning on using race provided fuel versus carrying your own. So like a lot of races tend to use Gatorade Endurance, which does have carbs and electrolytes. So you need to be mindful of that as well. If you're not planning on carrying what you normally take on your race day, you will need to practice your carbohydrates along with the race fueling as well. So like that's just another kind of variable you need to consider, is whether you're going to be relying solely on race, in which case you need to know exactly what they're serving so you can figure out what additional things you may need to carry as far as fueling. But that is another, Gatorade Endurance has a lot of calories in it, and that is a popular, drink at marathons, half marathons, and a lot of races will offer. So I think that's sometimes where you do need to test that and bring that into your mix.
That's a really great point. Yeah, I didn't think about that, that you do need to try and test what is on the race course if you're planning to use it. But I think that's also, especially in the summer months, a good reminder to get comfortable carrying a water bottle. Because if you don't like or don't trust whatever they have on the course, it's okay to have that sort of as your backup, that, in an emergency, you've got aid stations there that you can use. But it's faster and it's more efficient to drink from a bottle than to try to drink from cups that may or may not be mixed correctly. You don't know if you're getting a full cup or if you're getting like 2 sips within that cup. So get comfortable carrying a water bottle. I know a lot of people find it's not comfortable. They feel like it's heavy. But it's not. A 16-ounce water bottle weighs about a pound, a little bit over a pound. So it feels really heavy, but it's really not. It's really not that much extra weight. And it keeps you in control of the product and the amount that you're putting in your body as you go. So that starts to get into our next video. We are going to have an in-depth conversation on hydration, on sweat, and some really cool new products that Michelle is demoing, and I hope that I will get to demo here before we make this next video. So stay tuned. We are just heading into the summer, and we are going to be talking about hydration and sweat a lot here. So I hope you'll join us next time. If you have any questions about any of the information we covered today, or about any new topics that you're interested in hearing about, feel free to drop a comment or send us a message. You can find us at moremilestogo.com, or on social media, YouTube, you can find us at More Miles Run Coaching. All right. Thanks for joining me, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.